In the last lecture, we had studied the classical approach towards the study of management. And in the classical approach, the criticism of the classical approach was that the human element was missing from that classical approach. So, the human element, which is covered largely in the behavioral approach, and it's also called the neoclassical approach. We will briefly discuss this new classical approach. One thing is for sure that scientific approach or the classical approach towards management was it was able to satisfy the need of that hour in which production and product orientations were important, and human beings how human beings were utilized by the organization, it came to assume second priority at that point in time. Also, one has to appreciate the fact that whenever there is lack of any order or discipline in techniques of work, the first priority for any manufacturer or any company is towards improving, bringing about a order in the workflow. Only after the workflow is established, only after the most efficient methods of production are established, then the manufacturer or the company thinks of the higher goals of uh, improving the lot of its own workers. The importance of behavioral approach is that it emphasizes on improving management through psychological makeup of the organizational members. It does not treat the human resource as a machine, but as somebody which has which is there in flesh and blood, who has emotions, who has a rational process of thinking, who has societal needs, who has a need to be loved, need to be respected, need to be rewarded. So this approach is also known as human resource approach. And this approach looks to solve the labor management conflict which are likely to arise out of classical approach to management. The focus area of the behavioral approach are conflict prevention, number one, prevention of conflict, number two, teamwork, number three, motivation, number four, leadership and communication. Once again, the focus areas are conflict prevention, teamwork, motivation, leadership, and communication. Behavioral approach thinks that once all these areas are covered and properly addressed, it not only satisfies the objective of classical approach, which is increased productivity, it also satisfies the need of the workforce, workforce to be respected, to be liked. It creates an atmosphere of camaraderie in the organization. The three important studies that contributed greatly to the behavioral approaches. Number one is Hawthorne studies. We will discuss Hawthorne studies, theory X and theory Y, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. Let me also tell you that theory X and theory Y I will touch only in brief, and also Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory, because this is covered in unit 4 in great detail in the section that pertains to staffing. In the behavioral approach towards the study of management, Hawthorne studies Hawthorne studies in United States carried during the 1920s. They are the watershed 1920s is the watershed era in the study of or in the experimentation of human behavior and how it impacts the productivity of organization. There was a company called Western Electric's Hawthorne Works in Chicago, and the engineers, they conducted a series of scientific experiments to examine the impact of lighting on employee productivity. So if better lighting leads to more productivity, or if dimmed light or lack of good lighting, it reduces productivity. So what the engineers did, that they divided workers into two groups. One was called the experimental group and the other was called the control group. So experimental group was the group which was subjected to varying degrees of lighting or varying intensity of lighting. And in control group, the lighting remained normal throughout. It was uh, seen that with experience, as the time went by, the productivity, which means number of units produced per person, it was actually increasing for both the groups in all lighting conditions. And these employees were not told that they were part of any experiment, and they were given a kind of a free atmosphere to interact, mingle with one another. And it was observed that in case of experimental group, even when the lighting was reduced, that means lighting is representative of environment conditions, even when environment conditions were less congenial, a bit adverse, it did not have any impact on productivity. So productivity was increasing both in experimental group and in control group. Control group was also reporting higher productivity even without any change in lighting. So if control groups with time, if control groups lighting was not improved, it was constant, even it was going up. This puzzled engineers, and it compelled them to look for reasons beyond lighting for changes in the productivity levels of employees, because till now the scientific theory meant better conditions, better working conditions, and better physical environment will lead to more productivity, but it was not happening. So this was a remarkable exercise which led to the belief that there is something more important than merely the physicality of the environment. At that point in time, Elton Mayo, who was a professor, he joined these studies. And Elton Mayo, he was a Harvard Business School professor, and he became a part of this study, and he brought some of his scholars with him. So they carried out a second experiment, and they tried to determine the influence of few other external environment. Like in case of the studies which were held till now, the atmosphere, the external factor was lighting. But now they started to determine factors such as wages, rest timings, refreshments, drinking water. So six female employees were brought together to form a group, and they had no prior information that they were part of a study or an experiment. They were given increased wages, convenient rest timings. So they were given a degree of freedom, flexible working hours. They could chit chat with one another. There was less supervisions, and perhaps they were given less working hours during a particular week. It was found that their productivity increased significantly when all these factors was provided. However, gradually these benefits were withdrawn without telling them why they were being withdrawn. And it was thought by Elton Mayo and the other scholars that the productivity rate will decline, but this did not happen. So once again, this was very startling revelation. The researchers failed to establish any direct relationship between external factors In this case, what were the external factors? Higher wages, rest timings, better wages, rest timings, refreshments, flexible work days, reduced number of hours. So even when these factors were taken away, it did not lead to any significant decline in the productivity. So this led to the conclusion that more than external factors, what motivates people to keep giving higher levels of productivity is group atmosphere, group relation, group attitude, the freedom which you give. For example, these women, they were given freedom to chit chat with one another. They were, although wages and rest timings and refreshments were reduced, their freedom to talk to one another, their freedom to uh, remain friendly with one another, this was not reduced. So the group concluded that group, the study group concluded that group measures, that group atmosphere, group relation, group attitude, and collective group decisions, they have a better influence on group behavior than pay, perquisites, and work settings such as rest timings and length of work days and weeks. So this pioneering study compelled organizations to take a closer look at the social factors that influenced employee behavior and organizational productivity and performance. This study also helped the management to understand the role and relevance of trade unions as a representative of employees. So, what came out very strongly by the study, Hawthorne studies under Elton Mayo, was freedom, respect for freedom, and non-interference during working hours, a degree of initiative that was allowed. It had more impact on the productivity level than lighting, wages, rest timings, refreshments. So for the first time, it was conclusively proven that the behavioral aspect of management was perhaps even more important than the scientific aspect of management. So this is the importance of Hawthorne studies under Elton Mayo. This happened in US in the 20s. Douglas McGregor, he was a professor at Sloan School of Management. Incidentally, he also taught briefly at Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. So very matter of pride that he was associated with us also. In 1960, he formulated what is called Theory X and Theory Y. In this theory, he suggested two diametrically different aspects of human behavior. In other words, he took two different views of individuals. So, one which is a negative view, and one which is a positive view. So, it's an assumption. So, according to Douglas McGregor, and one thing, there is a criticism of McGregor's theory. People say that it is not based upon empirical evidence. So we have to examine. Somebody has to do a research. I encourage my students to find out if this is true or not. But it is said that he based from his own experiences by observations, but it does not have formalized empirical study to back this theory. I personally find this theory very interesting, and I have come in contact with several great men who, like Mr. Subir Raha, who became chairman of ONGC, and I had the good fortune of interacting with him on various subjects. Briefly, I was a management trainee, and he was a deputy general manager in Indian Oil Corporation, and I had a long discussion with him. Uh, Mr. Subiraha is credited for turning around ONGC from a behemoth to a very aggressive company which really did very well uh, in terms of diversification by going to the countries outside India and finding the new oil fields. ONGC Videsh thrived under when he was the chairman of ONGC. So he believed in Douglas McGregor's theory. So Douglas McGregor said that there are people who are individuals who are, uh, theory X people. So assumptions of theory X is an average employee intrinsically does not like to work and he tries to escape work whenever possible. So very negative view. People don't like to work. Do I agree with it? There are some people, at least I know, who don't want to work, who just want to come and collect their salary checks. And if given a work, if they will perform their normal function, is if it is as if they have done a great service to the company and to nation. Happens. It happened with me. I saw such people at work when I was a management trainee at a LPG bottling plant in a public sector oil company. And he says, since these employees do not want to work, they must be persuaded, compelled, warned with punishment so as to achieve organizational goals. So that means people have to be driven to work. A close supervision is required on the part of managers, and sometimes managers need to adopt a dictatorial approach towards such workers. He said these are the workers who, for whom job security is on the top. So they're scared of losing their jobs, that's it. But they don't have any aspiration to move up. They don't have any aspiration for recognition. They have no personal ambitions. And he says generally employees dislike responsibilities. Employees resist change. Most importantly, average employee needs formal direction. So this is the assumption of theory X. I will explain theory Y also. So theory X means people need to be coerced to work, compelled to work, driven to work. They must be closely supervised. So my students in the class, if the teacher is not there, students, do they study or do they like to engage in banter and mischief and uh, cutting jokes? Do they open their books and then they start to study unless the teacher is there? So anyway, so what I'm trying to tell you is this is Douglas McGregor's assumption of theory X. I will explain to you in the next slide the assumptions under theory Y. Now the assumptions by Douglas McGregor under theory Y are diametrically opposite to the assumptions under theory X. Under theory X, people generally shirked responsibilities, didn't want to work. Theory Y, if in theory X they were devils, here they are contrary or directly opposite of being devils. They are angels. So, theory Y says that employees perceive their job as important to them, dear to them, and they take job as a normal routine, a relaxing routine, and they exercise great amount of physical and mental efforts in their jobs. So they may not only require threat or external control or coercion, but they can use their self direction, self control, inner motivation, dedication, their inherent goodness of being a human to achieve some kind of a satisfaction during their working hours. Theory Y says that if the job is rewarding and satisfying and soothing, it will result in employees' loyalty and commitment to the organization. Theory Y also says that an average employee can learn to admit responsibilities, accept responsibilities, recognize the responsibility. In fact, he can even learn to obtain responsibility, ask for responsibility. Diametrically opposite to theory X. So, not only they admit and recognize their responsibilities. In fact, they can learn to adopt and ask for responsibilities. It also says all employees have skills and capabilities, and their logical capabilities can be carefully utilized. Their creativity, creative resourcefulness, and their innovativeness and their inherent potential, it can be utilized to solve complex organizational problems. So, while theory X provides a pessimistic view of employees' nature and behavior at work, theory Y provides a optimistic view of employees' nature and behavior at work. If you correlate with Maslow's need hierarchy theory, we will explain Maslow's need hierarchy theory, in which uh, theory X is based on the assumptions that employees, they want their physiological needs to be met. They are not craving towards the aspirational needs, for esteem needs. So McGregor himself viewed theory Y to be more valid and reasonable than theory X. So he encouraged cordial relationship in the team, responsible and stimulating jobs, enhancement of work content, and participation of everyone in decision making. So, what are the implications of theory X and what are the implications of theory Y? We will find out. So, what are the implications of theory X and theory Y? See, many organizations use theory X even today. Some organizations use theory Y, some use a combination of both. Theory X encourages use of tight control and supervision. It implies that the employees are reluctant to organizational changes. Thus, it does not encourage innovation. You know, so you will find in such organizations not very great productivity or not very congenial relationship between workmen and the management. There are constant uh, tugs of war between the management and the workers. There are strikes. As long as there are tight control and as long as the workers, they are sufficiently suppressed, a strike will not happen. But once in a while, the discontent will erupt. I am not saying that there are no workers who are not theory X types. There are workers, but with proper training, with proper motivation, with proper behavioral skill workshops, even the attitudes can be changed. There are many organizations that are using theory Y techniques. Theory Y implies that managers should create and encourage a work environment which provides opportunities to employees to take initiative and self direction. In the new generation companies, the new age companies, mostly theory Y technique is followed, but there are times that employees require supervision, and there are times employees need to be given a lot of freedom and a lot of independent space. One cannot dismiss any of the two theories. One cannot say that theory X is completely useless and theory Y is God sent, heavenly. Equally, one cannot say that nothing like self motivated, propelled from inside employees exist in the real world. They do exist. So it is up to the management and up to the managers and up to the leadership to bring the best out of people. There are some workers who may require close supervision. There are some workers who will flourish in an atmosphere which respects their independence, which gives them freedom to take initiatives. Equally, there are some workers who may not require any degree of control at all. Normally, it is seen that as the levels go up in the organization, as people progress to greater roles, to roles of greater responsibility, they are mostly driven by the ability to prove to themselves that they are doing a good job. When people are engaged at a lower level at a mundane job which is repetitive and which does not bring them any joy, which does not require any specific skill set, or when people see that there is a dead end and there is no future in their careers, these people are not so much motivated towards work. So perhaps they will require some kind of a supervision, some kind of a monitoring. So a mix of theory X and theory Y, but with more and more emphasis on the theory Y style of management is what in my view is the best way of managing the workforce. Another American and another theory. So all these things were happening in America, Hawthorne experiments, then Douglas McGregor's theory X and theory Y, then Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. Abraham Maslow, he was a well-renowned social scientist and a management expert. He proposed hierarchy of needs theory in 1943. So this is actually a classical depiction of human motivation. The theory is based upon assumption that there is a hierarchy of needs. Hierarchy means there is a sequential order. It's like a pyramid, at the base bottom there is a need, then first level need, second level need. So he gave five levels of needs or five hierarchies of need. And he says the urgency of these needs can vary. But what he said is only after one level of need is satisfied, the man tries to find satisfaction for his other needs. There is a famous saying that a man can live on bread alone if there is no bread. What does it mean? So if there is no bread, that is man can hungry at that point in time, the motivation in the man is he wants bread. And he thinks that if he gets bread, he is happy. And beyond that, he doesn't want anything. So a man can live on bread alone if there is no bread. But you will find that if he has bread, he wants butter also. He would like to have a glass of milk also. And once he has a glass of milk, then he will want a situation that this bread, butter, and milk, he must also get a life partner perhaps. Okay. So after that, he will say that he must have a house. So these are physiological needs, physiological needs. And after that, he will say that they should continue, they should not stop. So there has to be safety. And then he will say that people need to recognize that he is well fed. So there is a hierarchy of needs. So what are these five hierarchies of needs? At the bottom of the pyramid is physiological need. After that is safety need. Above that is social need, then esteem needs and self-actualization needs. So let us try to understand what are these needs. Physiological needs are basic needs. You need to breathe air, you need fresh potable water, you need food, you need clothing, you need shelter, you need mask also nowadays. Isn't it? In other words, physiological needs are the needs of basic amenities of life. Physiological needs: air, water, food, clothing, shelter. One level above physiological need is safety needs. Safety needs include physical, environmental, and emotional safety and protection. Once again, physical, environmental, and emotional safety and perfection. For instance, job security, safety. You want secure job. That's why people want a government job. Job security, financial security. You must have a job, financial security, the salary must accrue into your account every month. Then protection, you need protection from animals, protection from diseases. You need the security for your family, and you need health security. These are security needs. So physiological needs, and over physiological needs, safety needs. Above safety needs in the hierarchy of Maslow's hierarchy of need theory, third is social needs. So social needs include the need for belongingness, the need for love, the need for affection, the need for to be cared, friendship. These are social needs. Social media, that's why they call it social media. There is something called FOMO. Have you heard of FOMO? FOMO means fear of missing out. So the moment you get up in the morning, you go to your WhatsApp to see what are you missing, or you go to the Twitter or Instagram if you missed out on something. Social needs. So what did we start? The premise was a man can live on bread alone if there is no bread. Once the bread comes, physiological needs are met, then safety needs. You want the bread to continue coming, then social needs. Perhaps you want to have this bread with other people. You don't want to have it alone, you want to have it in a group setting. Above social needs, there are esteem needs. Esteem. Have you heard of this word called self-esteem? My self-esteem is very low, some people say. If you're having very low morale. Esteem needs are of two types, external and internal. So internal esteem needs are like, self-respect, confidence, feeling of competence, achievement feeling, feeling that you are free. These are internal esteem needs. Once again, confidence in yourself, respect for yourself, self-respect. The feeling that you are competent gives you confidence. The feeling of having achieved. So uh, you have achieved graduation, you have completed your graduation, and after that you are free to take up a job. Internal esteem needs. Then there is external esteem needs, which will come from the people. Recognition. You want to be recognized. You want to be recognized that okay, he's done something. Power, status, attention. People seek attention and admiration. Recognition, power, status, attention, recognition. You need to be recognized. You want to be recognized. Okay, this man has 600 followers. He's following only 60 people. So, people who are following him is 10 times people that he is following. That gives you a sense of self-esteem. People ask how many followers you have on Insta. How many followers? At the top of the pyramid is self-actualization need. A man eventually, or a woman for that matter, so when I say man, you have to take it both as a man and a woman, or a neutral gender. A man wants to achieve whatever he is capable of becoming, and whatever potential he has. It includes need for self growth, self contentment. It is also manifested in the need to gain more knowledge, do some social service, creativity, sense of aesthetics. Self actualization needs are never fully satiated. An individual keeps growing psychologically, opportunities keep cropping up for continuing growth. So, these are the five needs. And in terms of these five needs, according to Maslow, individuals are motivated by unsatisfied needs. A man can live on bread alone if there is no bread, once again. As each of the needs is significantly satisfied, it can never be fully satisfied. It drives and forces a man to, uh, to go for the next need. Next need will emerge. So Maslow grouped these five needs into two categories: higher order needs and lower order needs. So psychological and safety needs, they constituted the lower order needs. and the lower order needs are mainly satisfied externally. Then the social esteem and self actualization, they constituted the higher order needs. These higher order needs are constituted, they are generally satisfied internally within you, within an individual. So if the economy is doing very well, there is a boom period, the lower order needs are met, physiological needs and the safety needs are met, and social needs, self esteem needs and self actualization needs, they are considered to be external, the higher level needs. So what is the implication of Maslow's theory, or how does it assist a manager in decision making in managing his group? So as far as physiological needs are concerned, the organizational management, it should give employees appropriate salary so that their basic necessities of are met. Apart from that, they should give them rest periods, eating opportunities, etc. So as far as safety needs are concerned, managers or management of companies should provide the employees job security, safe and hygienic environment, retirement benefits, so safety needs. As far as social needs are concerned, the management should encourage teamwork and organize social events. So I am trying to tell you how Maslow's theory can be used by management or managers as a tool to achieve harmony, peace, productivity, and prosperity in the organization. So psychological need, you need to give salary on time. You need to take care of, you need to give them lunch breaks, or in fact, if you can provide them a cafeteria to eat, some companies provide free lunch also. So safety needs is you give them salary on time, you give them secure job, you give them safe and hygienic working environment, retirement benefits. Social needs is you encourage teamwork and you organize social events. Esteem needs are concerned, how will manager meet your esteem needs? By giving rewards, appreciating the employees, giving them higher ranks or positions. So if a person is doing the same job and after 3 years, if you 5 years, you make him from assistant manager to deputy manager, even if you don't change the content of his work, he will feel sufficiently motivated. Self actualization needs are the top of the hierarchy. So managers can give employees challenging jobs which will challenge their potential, because a man wants to actualize, wants to achieve whatever he is capable of. That is the concept of self actualization. So you give them challenging jobs in which employees skills and competences are fully utilized, and opportunities so that man or an employee, he should be given growth opportunities so that he can reach the peak of his capabilities. So managers must identify the need level at which the employee is existing right now, and those needs which he is aspiring for, and he should push him to that need for for giving him the motivational push. Are there some limitations of Maslow's theory? It's like this, that not all employees are governed by same set of needs. Some people, some needs are suppressed, they are not sufficiently present. So it is always the most powerful unsatisfied need that motivates an individual. Once again, for Maslow's theory also, it is said that the theory is not empirically supported. Another limitation is that there are some people, they may not be so much bothered about physiological needs or safety needs, but they are more bothered about recognition, self-esteem. For example, a creative artist, he, more than a hike in salary, he will need a reward, or he will need a encouragement or a public acknowledgement and appreciation of his skills. But by and by, Maslow's need hierarchy theory is a very brilliant theory for the managers to be able to bring about requisite level of motivation and zeal in their teams. So we have, with this, we have completed the behavioral approach towards the study of management. There are two, three more approaches, and we will go through them briefly. But and Maslow's theory and Douglas McGregor's theory X and Y will go in greater detail when we study the controlling part in Unit 4. Thank you. Apart from the behavioral approach and the classical approach or the scientific approach, there are few more approaches towards the study of management. So we will briefly discuss these approaches. So first we'll take the systems approach. So in this approach, management views the organization as a complex but unified system. Complex but unified. In fact, it is made up of number of subsystems, and all these subsystems are interrelated, although they are independent subsystems. For example, a factory is an independent unit, a sales office is an independent unit, but they are all related because the goods must flow from the factory to the sales office and the sales would take over. So like, production department, marketing department, finance department, they are all subsystems of an organization, but all these subsystems are unified in a planned way. And why are they planned? Because they have only one goal, which is the organizational goal and objective. So as per this approach, a change in any one subsystem can make different degrees of changes in the other subsystems. For example, if a marketing manager takes a price reduction strategy, so if the prices are reduced and if the top management says that you can reduce the prices, we don't mind as long as it doesn't impact the image of the product and it does not impact the margins. So if a marketing manager reduces price, that means there has to be cost reduction, because price minus cost is margin. So who will reduce the cost? Marketing department can also reduce their own marketing costs, but production department will also have to reduce the production cost. Finance department will have to reduce financial costs. So also another thing of systems approach is that, see, broadly organizations can be closed organizations and they can be open organizations. In a closed organization, the external environment, it does not impact the organization. But there can be no business organization really which is a closed system. So open system, in this organization it interacts with the external environment and gets influenced by such interaction. So this is an open system. No organization can remain closed to the external influence or environment, except except for some institutions. What are the closed systems? Prison or a monastery. You can say they are closed systems. But are they? So let us see the working of the systems approach. Maybe I should explain it to you in the next slide with a diagram. So in this working of systems approach, which is illustrated in the book by Professor Praveen Durai, he is showing external environment. And the first part is input. So input can be in terms of people, capital, physical resources, technical and managerial skills. This is the input, and after that there is a transformation process will include transformation of input into output is done by transformation process, and that process is managerial process of planning, organizing, staffing, leading and controlling, and then it results in output again goes to the external environment, isn't it? Product, services, profits, customer satisfaction. So this is the systems approach which has been explained by Professor Durai Swami, Professor Praveen Durai. After that, after the systems approach, let us also understand the contingency or situational approach. The basic philosophy of this is that there is no one best way of managing people in situation. The appropriate management strategy usually varies from one situation to another, and the effectiveness of the management approach depends on the congruence of a number of factors such as organizational goals, nature of activities, level of technology, prevailing environment. So if these are different, then the approach for successful achievement of goal is different. And there is no universally applicable solution to managerial issues. It is essentially for managers to be flexible in evolving appropriate strategy. So they must actively consider the differences in the individuals and situations before choosing a specific course of action for solving managerial problems. So this is the contingency approach. After contingency approach, there is information technology approach. In actually there is a quantitative or operation research approach. This application is of mathematical and statistical models, information models, and computer simulations for problem solving of managers and decision making. The mathematical techniques adopted for the quantitative approach are linear, nonlinear programming, queuing theories, chaos theories, economic order quantity. So the primary purpose of applying these techniques in management is to improve the quality and accuracy of managerial decisions. Total quality management is basically a philosophy, and total quality management also is a result of this approach. Total quality management basically is a philosophy and a set of guidelines for continuously improving the organization. And TQM is an integrated approach. It can be defined as a total organizational approach for meeting customers' expectations, needs, so that every part of the organization from managers to employee, they are involved in the direction of achieving the ultimate aim of customer satisfaction. So in TQM there are many series like ISO 9000 series, there is Pareto analysis, there is matrix diagram, histogram, decision tree diagrams. Lot of statistical techniques are used in quantitative or operations approach. Then there is IT approach. In information technology, it is very popular because managers have begun to rely heavily on IT tools and the internet for efficient management of physical and human resources. So they depend on emails, intranet, PowerPoint presentations, video conferences for information sharing, for IT, and IT has brought about change in the very nature of management task itself. It has also enabled managers to replace a manually maintained database with an IT enabled database. You are seeing that of late organizations are making use of social networking sites such as Facebook and Twitter for communicating business and product information with the customers. So I have explained to you all the approaches towards study of management. In this concluding part of lecture number 8, we will discuss strategic management. Sometimes a question is asked what is meant by strategic management. Also, I would like to tell you that strategic management is covered in great detail in Unit 2 also in the process of planning. Okay, so strategic management, as Donald F. Harvey has defined, strategic management as a set of managerial decisions. First of all, it is a set of managerial decisions and actions which determine the long run performance of a corporation. Long run. So it's a process, it's a set of managerial decisions and actions which will determine the long run performance of an organization. By when we say long run, we don't mean in eternity, but we also don't mean what will happen in 6 months and 8 months, but over the period of, let us say, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. And this includes environmental scanning, strategy formulation, strategy implementation, evaluation, and control. It is like this. Strategic management, to start with, is a systematic process in which you will first determine the goals that are to be accomplished in the future. This may involve studying the internal and the external environment. So internal environment is essentially the environment which is made about within the organization, on which the organization has a control. On external organization, there is little control. It is shaped by factors like customers, suppliers, competitors, even the rules and regulations, the legislative processes. So the process of strategic management, it will involve development, execution, and appraisal of a corporate strategy, long-term plan to achieve performance goal. It has been explained in the next slide uh, by Fred R. David, and he says there are three parts of strategy. One is strategy formulation, strategy implementation, and strategy evaluation. So first, in strategy formulation, you develop a vision and mission statement, and you make a scan of external environment. You do the analysis of external environment and internal environment analysis. So once you have developed vision and mission statement, you have studied, made the analysis of external environment and internal environment, then you establish long-term objectives. Once you have established long-term objectives, you generate, evaluate, and choose strategy. How will you achieve this objective? So if you want to become a leader in the motorcycle industry, what kind of technology you will bring, which tie-up you will do, should you tie up with the Italian manufacturer or with the Japanese manufacturer, or should you buy a current company in India? So you will evaluate all these strategies and you will choose that strategy, and then you will implement that strategy. So strategy implementation. So if you want to set up a plant, you will set up a plant, you will set up distribution houses, and strategic strategy evaluation, not evolution. Evaluation is you will measure and evaluate your performance. So this is Fred R. David's model, and the steps are determination of values and missions, analyzing the environment, strategy formulation, strategy implementation, and strategy evaluation. I have given the links to various articles, and you can study more about them. But once again, we will study strategic management and strategy in greater detail in Unit 2. So this ends the Unit 1 of our course for BBA LLB.